Hey guys and gals, Shane Simmons here. We're going to take a little look at the Sinking Spring Cemetery in Abingdon, Virginia. And Abingdon is one of those towns, and there are quite a few of them around, that really is too much to cover in just one video. So you kind of break it up in pieces. So this will be the first in several videos probably that come from Abingdon area. Just noticed my haircut, looking good. Thanks, Amy, if you happen to be watching this. But so I hope you enjoy this look at Sinking Spring Cemetery. It's very historic, just a great place to visit for local history, and it's just a cool place to see. Check it out.
Hey guys, Shane Simmons, the Appalachian Project, and it may look like I'm coming to you from prison, but no. I am at the Sinking Spring Cemetery in Abingdon, Virginia, so before anybody gets too excited, I'm safe and sound, although you could probably make a case that I deserve to be somewhere else, but that's another story for another day. Anyway, Sinking Spring Cemetery, a lot of history here. We'll get on the tour and I won't take up too much of your time with the introduction, but great place to check out. Abingdon just chock full of history, and this place is no exception. So hopefully you enjoy this tour, and I'll see you in a second. So as I'm approaching the entrance, I want to point your attention across the road, and that is the African American Cemetery, which is not accessible through this one. You actually have to cross the road, as you can see, and get over there. And a lot of people miss that when they come here to visit. They don't even realize that's there, and they don't take time to appreciate it, and obviously that's a big, huge part of our history, so I'll try to make my way over there before this video ends. As you walk through here, you'll notice once you enter to the left, there's an old cabin. It's called the Parson Cummings cabin, and it dates back to around 1773. And during the Highlands Festival every year, they usually have a presentation, a walking tour that they do through here, and it's just fantastic. They dress in period clothing and give a little history of the people and the cemetery itself. They do just a fantastic job. Like I say, the Abingdon Historical Society is fantastic. They do as good a job as anybody in this country, I would have to imagine. And you'll see the above ground grave we're approaching has a really interesting history. It was actually for a few days home to the body of Confederate General John Hunt Morgan. He passed away in 1864, and they brought him here, and according to the sign, it says they had a funeral procession of about 3 miles long, which was the longest seen in Abingdon, at least at that time. But he only stayed here for a few days, and he was actually relocated to Richmond in the Hollywood Cemetery there, and he was there for 3 or 4 years, and he ended up being transferred to Lexington Cemetery in Lexington, Kentucky, his hometown. So he actually did more traveling after death than many people do in a lifetime. Anyway, take a little close-up of it. It's now home to the body of John Henry Martin, whose story I do not know, but as I say, Abingdon is chock full of historians, so I'm sure somebody will jump in the comments and clue us all in on it. And as we walk up here, you'll see in the distance, to the little bit of right of the screen, we'll be approaching the Unknown Confederate Dead Memorial, and I'll see you there in just a second. As promised, here I am at the Tomb for the Unknown Confederate Dead, and just outside of that there's a memorial for soldiers who fought in the Civil War who are buried here at the Sinking Spring Cemetery, and it's got a list of names there. And at the top, near the top anyway, the second one down, Brigadier John B. Floyd, and we'll take a look at his grave here in a few minutes. I'm going to show you how this thing looks. And as you can see, several people still come by and pay tribute to the fallen Confederate soldiers. And I don't know if you can read that, but it was dedicated by the Anna Stonewall Jackson Chapter UDC, September 30, 1961. Now, the Unknown Confederate Dead, there was a train accident that happened here. Just a little trivia there, and it ended up with resulting in several unknown dead Confederate soldiers who are buried here. Keep walking around, but as you can see, this is a very older cemetery dating back, like I said, to the 1700s. So a lot of the tombstones are not in the greatest of shape. That's just standard for the time period. given the technology. It's kind of odd to see in the background. You'll see what appears to be a youth football field. So I'm not sure how that came about. I've got to imagine it probably wasn't wonderfully well received at the time, but anyway. We'll keep walking on up here until I find something else of note. And here we are at the grave of John Buchanan Floyd. Like I said, he was a brigadier general in the Confederate Army. And it's fairly nondescript grave that you'd expect for a noted politician and certainly a brigadier general in the Civil War. It's actually grossly overshadowed by the grave of Eliza Hughes. Anyway, John Buchanan Floyd, he had served as Secretary of War prior to the Civil War, and then he resigned that commission and became a general. So he started out and he suffered a tremendous loss at the Battle of Carnifex Ferry, and it led to a spat between him and another governor, Henry Wise, who had been another governor of Virginia, and they had just a brutal dislike for each other. So they ended up making a choice that John Buchanan Floyd would be sent to the Western Theater. So he ended up down toward Nashville, and where he suffered another humongous loss at the Battle of Fort Donelson. The thing with John Buchanan Floyd, he was more of a politician. He didn't have any type of military experience, so he had to defer to his underlings, and so that ended up not going very well for him. Anyway, after that loss, he was reassigned and ended up passing away in 1863. But here he is buried. He was born in Blacksburg, and now his body resides in Abingdon. Take a look around for a couple other graves out here, but I thought that's an interesting story, and I guess he still gets a little tribute from, I think this old battle flag has seen better days. Maybe somebody will come freshen that up for him, but anyway, that's the story of John Buchanan Floyd. Okay, before I get into this grave history, I want to get back up a little bit. I think I alluded to it, but John Buchanan Floyd was actually the 31st governor of Virginia. And as I talked about his dispute with Henry Wise, and if I sounded a little biased, I may be, because Henry Wise, my great-great-grandfather, served under him in the 2nd Battalion, North Carolina Infantry, and was captured at the Battle of Roanoke Island. And so my great-great-grandfather, Matthew Ephraim Simmons, signed a vow to never take up arms against the North again, and of course he reneged on that and immediately went to Wytheville and signed up again to serve in the 23rd Battalion, Virginia. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, you got to watch us Simmonses, you know? We kind of look out for ourselves. Anyway, moving right along. So I talked about John B. Floyd was the 31st governor, Henry Wise was the 33rd, and here is the 27th governor of Virginia, David Campbell. So he is also buried here, and he's also got a relatively muted grave considering that he was governor of the state at one time. But I guess in comparison to the graves around him, I guess probably considered pretty gaudy in its day. All right, well, moving right along. And with that, I'll end this section of this video, the Sinking Spring Cemetery, but I will go to the African American cemetery in just a second. Did want to read some of the information off of the sign. It talks about in 1773, the Reverend Charles Cummings became the minister of the Sinking Spring Presbyterian congregation, and a meeting house was soon constructed here of logs. The earliest grave dates back to 1776, and there are veterans of the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, and the Civil War. There were 2 Virginia governors, David Campbell and John B. Floyd. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, John B. Floyd served as President James Buchanan, Secretary of War, and that pretty well covers the story here. I'll see in just a second here when I cross the road, which is a little on the tricky side, by the way, in case anybody wants to come and visit the African American cemetery. There's not really there's this little tough patch right here, so you got to be really super careful when you go up there to the gate. So I just want to mention that in case anybody has ideas of coming up here. It's not the easiest thing in the world. Just keep your heads up and pay attention. Don't go after dark. And as I'd hoped I'd been able to do, I've actually crossed the road into the African American cemetery. Give you a little shot of that. So this was a place that slaves were buried. And the most notable grave here is this one up here in the very far corner, right beside actually a residential home. And that is for Landon Boyd. Car just drove by. I don't know if you heard me, so I'll repeat myself. That's Landon Boyd. He was slated to be a juror in the trial of Jefferson Davis, who was, of course, was the president of the Confederate States of America. And of course that trial never took place, but he was to be one of the jurors in that trial had it taken place. I'm going to wrap this video up, but I did want to make mention too. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the name of James Bud Robertson, who was my professor in Civil War history at Virginia Tech. And I was in his class while he was writing the book on Stonewall Jackson, and it has become the foremost book in telling the story of Stonewall Jackson. So I'd encourage anybody to check it out. But he passed away a few months ago, Dr. Robertson, and he really lit a passion for Civil War history with me. So I wanted to let him know that he may be gone, but his legacy lives on. So hope you guys enjoyed this tour. Thank you for watching, subscribing, liking, commenting, correcting any errors, adding any more information you can, because I really appreciate it. I don't certainly know everything there is to know about these things, and I love learning. So do feel free, and don't hesitate to send comments or messages. Really appreciate it. But thanks for watching as always, and I'll check it out on the next video.